Statement to the European Parliament this afternoon from the Commission President, Mr Barroso, but is Europe actually going to do anything about the Eurozone mess? With me now are two British MEPs of different views. They are Sharon Bowles, a Liberal Democrat, Chairman of the Banking Committee, and Nigel Farage, the UK Independence Party, the leader of that. Sharon Bowles, first of all, are we finally moving to Europe doing something, making up its mind, coming up with enough money to bail out the Eurozone?
I hope so, but I don't think it's going to be as simple as a bailout. Or indeed, I think that's probably exactly what it won't be. It will need to be a package of things. There's a toolbox of instruments, shoring up the banks so that they can make sure that they can withstand any shocks that are coming, working out exactly what is going to be done with Greece that is sustainable for the future, and making sure that there are at least the signposts in place as to what kind of further integration might be necessary within the Eurozone, because that will be necessary in order to unlock use of the financial stability mechanism.
Who's going to pay for this, Nigel Farage?
Well, very good question, and that's one the Germans are asking themselves, of course, because I mean the solution to more integration means turning the European Union into a transfer union. Now the West Germans have just spent 20 years paying for East Germany to come in. It's one thing to pay a huge sum of money for your own people, but to be signed up to an endless open check to Greece, we can talk about the economics of this, but politically, right across Northern Europe, this is becoming unacceptable.
But is it not in the Germans' interest to keep the Eurozone going? The alternative would be worse for them, wouldn't it?
Well, it is. If you do an analysis in cash per capita terms, then it's actually a lot simpler and cheaper just to go and bail out Greece than it is to allow a Eurozone disintegration.
That's if the bailouts work, Sharon. But we're already on the second Greek bailout. Who knows, the third could be just around the corner. The problem here is structural. Germany and Greece cannot survive together in the same economic and monetary union, and what should happen is Greece should be allowed to go.
Well, we know you didn't want to be here, Nigel Farage, but the fact is if the Eurozone broke up and we got competitive devaluations and appreciations of currency, I mean, that would plunge the world economy into a worse position.
Not necessarily. Look, markets go up and down all the time. The dollar floats, the pound floats, the yen floats. We've seen sterling fall by 30% over the course of the last 5 years without the ceiling falling in. We cannot go on with Greece and Portugal inside this economic and monetary union. If we do, then I'm genuinely fearful for what will happen socially within countries like Greece.
I think what is quite interesting is that you've said that it needs a bailout, but in fact we haven't had a bailout. All we've had is loans, and I said that they had to have a solution that was sustainable, because it is true that you cannot have a Eurozone where some countries are not able to compete.
But do you think it's sustainable with Greece, Portugal, Italy still in the Eurozone? Is that sustainable in your view?
If the right kind of changes are made, looking forward in terms of their competitiveness and also in terms of what is done with their debt.
Look, either Greece gets its currency back and has a devaluation, or we have to slash the wages of the public sector in Greece, and that will lead to a revolution. We're stuck. They're stuck inside an economic prison. Good Europeans would help them get out.
Of course, Sharon Bowles, there's also the question as to whether Europe can take decisions. If one looks at what's happened in Slovakia overnight, I mean, in the end, this does have to go back to individual nation states, and if they're not happy with it, then it may be impossible for the European Union to move forward.
I have to admit that I'm more depressed about this than I have ever been before. I think that Slovakia probably can pass it later in the week, but the government will fall as a consequence. But the European Financial Stability Facility has already been made pretty inflexible by the decisions of other parliaments, and so the question is dangling: can we get something that is sufficient for the sovereigns? I think we can solve the bank recapitalisation problems. Whether we can solve the sovereign problem is still an open question.
So you see, it's quite an odd situation that the government falls and the deal rejected by Parliament goes through.
Well, I mean, I find it extraordinary. Of course, when people say no in Europe, it doesn't mean no. When the French said no, it didn't mean it. When the Dutch said no, it didn't mean it. When the Irish said no, they had to vote again. And now the Slovakian Parliament, Sharon informs us, will vote again this week and say yes.
Do you think that's fair?
Look, this thing has got no democratic legitimacy whatsoever.
That's how it's been negotiated. I mean, the opposition said they would support it if the government resigned. So that is essentially what's been done in a two-stage parliamentary process in Slovakia. So I don't think one should reject that. It shows how important this is. It shows that we are heading potentially for a train crash if we don't get things sorted. Government has fallen.
I know you want to keep the show on the road, but with hindsight, was it a bad idea, the euro?
I think it was a bad idea not to have the safeguards in place. I mean, there are many that the UK pointed out, but we have also made it worse with banking regulation that has come from Basel with zero risk weight for sovereign debt, so that the bond spreads didn't cause any discipline. And in fact, everybody assumed that bond spreads were a bad thing. I've always said bond spreads were a good thing, and there weren't enough of them.
So your predecessors in the Lib Dems got it wrong when they said join.
I think the predecessors in a lot of other places, and everybody got it wrong, but we didn't realise that by staying out of the euro, we wouldn't be affected. We are going to be severely affected because of our interconnection, and nobody foresaw that. I don't believe that the project is useless as a whole, and if we'd made some changes to it and gone into it, it would have been a different beast. But I mean, this is not the issue of the moment. The issue of the moment is the impending crisis.
There will have to be another treaty eventually when the Eurozone decides what it's going to do. And that, to a certain extent, will shoot your fox, won't it? Because powers will come back to Britain as part of that.
Well, I don't want crumbs from the table. I don't want Britain to be part of this political union. I want a Europe where we trade together, cooperate together, work together, be friends, rivals in trade, but not a Europe where Mr Barroso and Mr Van Rompuy tell us how we should live. I don't want it, and increasingly across the European Union, people don't want it either.
Not much enthusiasm for the EU, is there?
Well, I think that if we were to get to the position without it, we would suddenly regret what we had lost. It is very good for trade. If it fell apart, then I believe that we would have rampant protectionism. It is our hope of avoiding that. That's what normally happens 4 years after there has been some kind of financial crisis. At the moment, the single market is actually holding up. It's great for the City of London.
It's disastrous for the City of London.
No, it's great for the City of London.
I worked there for 20 years. It's disastrous.
In terms of the ability to do cross-border services, it is very good.
We're a global marketplace, Sharon, not a European marketplace.
Thank you both very much. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you.